"We've all agreed you're no longer part of the family," my son wrote. "Don't come to any gatherings." His wife even liked the message. I replied, "Thanks for confirming. I'll cancel all the auto payments." By midnight, the group chat flooded with panic. 100 missed calls. "Where are you watching from today?" Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me tell you how I got to this moment. Sitting in my quiet living room at 2 a.m., watching my phone buzz with the desperation of people who finally realized they'd bitten the hand that fed them. And trust me, I'd been feeding them very, very well. It started 3 weeks earlier at my grandson Tyler's graduation party. I'd spent $2,400 on catering because my son David insisted we needed something nice for his boy. Never mind that Tyler hadn't spoken to me in 6 months, or that his mother Jennifer had been giving me the cold shoulder since I'd refused to co-sign their vacation loan. I showed up anyway because that's what grandmothers do, right? Wrong. Apparently, that's what ATMs do. I arrived early to help set up, wearing the blue dress Jennifer had specifically requested I wear because it photographed better. The backyard looked beautiful, white lights strung between the trees, tables draped in navy and gold. David was grilling burgers while Jennifer directed traffic like a general commanding troops. "Mom, you're here?" David said, barely looking up from the grill. "Can you handle the drinks table? Jennifer has a whole system." Of course she did. Jennifer always had systems, especially when they involved me doing the work while she took the credit. I spent 20 minutes arranging beverages according to her color-coded chart, wondering when exactly I'd become the hired help at my own grandson's party. The guests started arriving around noon. Family friends, Tyler's classmates, neighbors. I watched from my assigned post by the drinks table as people complimented Jennifer on the beautiful party. She smiled and thanked them graciously, never once mentioning who'd actually paid for it all. That should have been my first clue. Tyler opened his gifts on the back patio, surrounded by friends and family. I'd gotten him a $500 gift card to Best Buy, figuring an 18-year-old could use it for college tech. When he unwrapped it, he glanced at it briefly and said, "Oh, cool. Thanks, Grandma Ruth." Then he tossed it aside to open the next present. No hug, no real acknowledgement. Just the bare minimum politeness you'd show a distant acquaintance. I watched from my spot by the drinks table, refilling ice and pretending it didn't sting. When had my grandson stopped caring about me? When had I become just another obligation in his life? The answer came during Jennifer's speech. She stood up on the patio steps, wine glass in hand, her voice carrying across the yard. "I just want to thank everyone for being here today to celebrate Tyler's achievement. David and I are so proud of the young man he's become, and we're grateful for all the support our family has given him." Our family, not his grandmother, not the woman who'd paid for his private tutoring, his sports equipment, his graduation party. Our family. But it was what happened next that really opened my eyes. Jennifer continued her speech, detailing all the people who'd made Tyler's success possible. She thanked his teachers, his coaches, his friends. She thanked David's boss for being flexible with his schedule. She even thanked the neighbors for being patient during his loud drum practice phase. She never mentioned me. Not once. I stood there, watching the woman whose mortgage I'd been secretly paying for 3 years give a heartfelt speech about family support. And I realized something that probably should have occurred to me years earlier. I wasn't family to them. I was a service provider. The party continued around me, but I'd stopped participating. I watched Jennifer hug Tyler, watched David beam with pride, watched relatives pat them both on the back for raising such a fine young man. Nobody looked my way. Nobody seemed to notice I was there at all. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself doing mental math, the catering bill, the deposit for Tyler's freshman dorm, the monthly transfers to David and Jennifer's account that they thought I didn't know they knew about, the car insurance I paid for Tyler's Honda, the credit card bills I'd quietly handled when David's construction business hit rough patches. By my calculations, I'd invested approximately $47,000 in Tyler's life over the past 4 years alone. Apparently, that bought me the privilege of standing by the drinks table, invisible and unacknowledged. The final straw came when I overheard Jennifer talking to her sister by the dessert table. "Thank God Tyler got into State University," Jennifer was saying. "The tuition is so much more reasonable than those private schools. And with David's income stabilizing, we should be able to handle it without too much stress. Her sister nodded sympathetically. It's so expensive these days. How are you managing? Jennifer lowered her voice conspiratorially. Well, between you and me, David's mother helps out sometimes. Nothing major, but every little bit counts. Nothing major. 3 years of mortgage payments, thousands in emergency loans, Tyler's entire graduation party. Nothing major. I set down the pitcher I was holding and walked quietly to my car. Nobody noticed me leave. Why would they? The ATM had served its purpose for the day. That night, I sat in my kitchen with my laptop open, staring at my bank's auto pay screen. Mortgage payment to David and Jennifer, $2,147 monthly. Car payment for Tyler's Honda, $378 monthly. Family cell phone plan, $240 monthly. Various credit card minimums for David's business expenses, $890 monthly. For 3 years, I'd been quietly covering $4,350 every month in expenses for a family that apparently didn't consider me part of their circle. That's when my phone buzzed with the group chat message that changed everything. David had created a family group chat a year earlier, supposedly to keep everyone connected. Jennifer, Tyler, David's brother Mark, Mark's wife Sarah, and me. It was mostly used for sharing photos and coordinating holiday plans. But this message was different. David: Hey everyone, Jennifer and I have been talking, and we think it's time for some boundaries. Mom, we've decided you're no longer part of our immediate family unit. We need space to grow as a nuclear family without interference. Please respect our decision and don't come to future gatherings. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. Then I watched as Jennifer liked it. Mark liked it. Sarah liked it. Even Tyler, my grandson, who I'd supported through 18 years of life, liked the message. That's when I typed my response. Thanks for confirming. I'll cancel all the auto payments. And then I did exactly that. Mortgage payment, canceled. Car payment, canceled. Cell phone plan, canceled. Credit card auto pays, canceled. All of it. Every automatic transfer that had been quietly flowing from my account to theirs for years. By midnight, my phone had 47 missed calls and 73 text messages. The group chat had exploded with panic. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to the woman they'd just excluded from the family. But I was done talking. I turned off my phone and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in years. Tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight, for the first time in decades, I felt like I mattered again, even if it was just to myself. The pounding on my front door started at 7:23 a.m. I know the exact time because I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise through my window, when the sound shattered the peaceful morning. Through the peephole, I could see David's face, red and angry. Behind him stood Jennifer, arms crossed, looking like she was preparing for war. I considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. After all, 12 hours ago, I apparently wasn't family. Now here they were, on my doorstep at dawn. Mom, what the hell have you done? David's voice cracked as I opened the door. I stepped back to let them in, noting how Jennifer pushed past me without so much as a greeting. They were both still in yesterday's clothes, looking like they hadn't slept. Good. Maybe they'd spent the night learning what real stress felt like. I did exactly what you asked, I said calmly. You wanted boundaries. You got them. Jennifer whirled around, her carefully styled hair now a mess. You can't just cancel everything. Do you know what you've done? I poured myself another cup of coffee, deliberately not offering them any. Let them stew in their panic while I enjoyed my morning routine. I've respected your wishes. You said I'm not family, so I stopped acting like family. David slumped into my kitchen chair without invitation. Mom, you don't understand. The mortgage payment is due tomorrow. If it doesn't go through, then I suppose you'll need to make other arrangements, I interrupted. Like actual adults do. The silence that followed was delicious. For years, I'd watched them take my financial support for granted, never once acknowledging the sacrifices I'd made to keep their lives comfortable. Now they were getting a taste of reality, and it was bitter medicine. Jennifer found her voice first. Ruth, this is ridiculous. We had a family disagreement, but that doesn't mean you should destroy our financial stability. Oh, I think you're confused, I said, settling back into my chair. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply no longer participating in your financial stability. There's a difference. The look that passed between David and Jennifer spoke volumes. They'd been counting on my money without ever actually asking for it, assuming my support was unconditional and eternal. Well, conditions had definitely changed. Look, David said, running his hands through his hair. Maybe we were harsh yesterday. We were emotional about Tyler leaving for college, worried about becoming empty nesters. We didn't mean to hurt you. Actually, you did, I replied. You meant every word. You just didn't expect consequences. Jennifer tried a different approach, her voice honey-sweet with fake concern. Ruth, we're family. Family works through problems together. We don't abandon each other over misunderstandings. I almost laughed. The woman who'd liked a message excluding me from the family was now lecturing me about abandonment. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. You're right, Jennifer. Family doesn't abandon each other. So tell me, when exactly did you start considering me family again? Was it when you realized your mortgage payment was canceled? Or when Tyler's car payment bounced? David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and paled. The bank's calling. They're asking about the missed payment. Better answer it, I suggested. Wouldn't want to damage your credit rating. As David stepped outside to take the call, Jennifer moved closer to me. Her mask of false sweetness finally slipped, revealing the calculating woman underneath. You can't do this to us, Ruth. We have obligations. Tyler's tuition deposit is due next week. The mortgage, the car payments, the credit cards. You know we can't cover all of this alone. Then perhaps you should have thought about that before excluding me from your family circle, I said. Amazing how quickly circumstances can change your perspective, isn't it? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. What do you want? Money? An apology? What's it going to take to fix this? And there it was. The question that revealed everything about their relationship with me. In Jennifer's mind, I was a problem to be solved, a situation to be managed. She genuinely couldn't understand that this wasn't about negotiation. It was about dignity. I want you to leave, I said simply. David came back inside, his face ashen. They're starting foreclosure proceedings if we miss another payment. Mom, please, we need your help. No, you need my money. There's a difference. I stood up and walked to my front door, opening it meaningfully. I think we're done here. You have your boundaries and I have mine. Jennifer's composure finally cracked completely. This is insane. You're destroying your own family over hurt feelings. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm just no longer rebuilding what you tear down every day. They left, but not before Jennifer turned back with one final threat. You'll regret this, Ruth. When Tyler needs help with college, when David's business struggles, when we lose the house because of your selfishness, you'll regret it. I closed the door and locked it. Regret? The only thing I regretted was waiting so long to find my backbone. My phone rang within minutes. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. Grandma Ruth? His voice was small, uncertain. For the first time in months, he sounded like the little boy who used to spend weekends at my house. Dad says you're not helping with my car payment anymore. That's right, sweetheart. But I don't have a job yet. How am I supposed to make the payments? It was a fair question, and part of me ached hearing the confusion in his voice. But Tyler was 18 now, legally an adult, and yesterday he'd liked a message that cut me out of his life. I suppose you'll need to find employment, I said gently. Most college students work part-time to cover their expenses. This is because of that stupid group chat thing, isn't it? Grandma, I didn't mean anything by it. I was just, I don't know, going along with what everyone else was doing. And there was the truth that hurt most of all. He hadn't excluded me because he was angry or hurt. He'd done it because it was easier than standing up to his parents, because I didn't matter enough to defend. Tyler, I love you. I always will. But loving someone doesn't mean enabling them to treat you badly. So you're punishing me because my parents are idiots? The question caught me off guard. Maybe Tyler understood more than I'd given him credit for. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I'm teaching all of you that actions have consequences, that people, even grandmothers, have limits. After I hung up, I made myself a sandwich and sat down with a legal pad. If I was going to rebuild my life without being anyone's ATM, I needed a plan. First, I called my financial advisor, Margaret Chen. We'd worked together for 15 years, and she'd been diplomatically questioning my family's financial dependence for at least 5 of those years. "Ruth," she said warmly, "I saw some unusual account activity yesterday. Is everything all right?" "Everything's perfect." "Margaret, I need to schedule a meeting to discuss redirecting some of my automatic payments. Permanently." There was a pause. "The family support payments?" "All of them." Another pause, then something that sounded suspiciously like relief in her voice. "How about tomorrow morning? I think we have a lot to discuss." That evening, my phone rang every 20 minutes. David, Jennifer, Tyler, even Mark and Sarah calling to mediate the situation. I let them all go to voicemail. At 11 p.m., a new message appeared in the family group chat. "David, Mom, please call me back. We can work this out. I know we hurt you, but we're family." Family forgives. Family forgives. But family also respects. Family also appreciates. Family also considers each other's feelings before making unilateral decisions about who belongs and who doesn't. I typed back one final message. Family is a two-way street. You'll figure out what that means when you're ready. Then I left the group chat entirely. For the first time in 3 years, I fell asleep without worrying about someone else's bills. It was a beautiful feeling, but something told me this was just the beginning of a much larger reckoning. Margaret Chen's office overlooked downtown from the 23rd floor, all glass and chrome with enough legal degrees on the wall to outfit a small law firm. I'd always felt slightly intimidated by the setting, but this morning I walked in like I owned the place. Funny how cutting toxic people out of your life can improve your posture. "Ruth, you look different," Margaret said, gesturing to the chair across from her mahogany desk. "Lighter somehow. $4,300 lighter every month. To be exact," I replied, settling in with my purse and the folder I'd prepared. "And yes, I feel wonderful." Margaret pulled up my accounts on her computer, her expression growing more pleased with each screen. "I have to say, Ruth, I've been hoping for this conversation for years. Your family's financial dependence has been concerning." "Tell me exactly how concerning." She turned her monitor so I could see the numbers. "In the past 5 years, you've transferred approximately $287,000 to various family members. Your retirement savings growth has been stunted by constant withdrawals. At your current age, you should be accumulating wealth, not depleting it." I stared at the figure. $287,000. Almost $300,000 I'd given to people who just told me I wasn't family. What would my net worth be if I hadn't made those transfers? Margaret clicked through several screens, running calculations. "Conservatively, you'd have about $840,000 more in your retirement accounts. With proper investment growth, potentially over $1 million. $1 million. I'd essentially given away $1 million retirement to fund my family's lifestyle, and they'd repaid me by cutting me out of their lives. Margaret, I want to make some changes. Big ones." Over the next hour, we restructured my entire financial life. The mortgage payment money would now go into a high-yield savings account. The car payment money would fund a new travel fund. The family cell phone money would cover my own increased insurance and healthcare costs. But the credit card auto-pays presented an interesting opportunity. "These business expenses David's been charging," Margaret said, reviewing the statements. "Are you aware that some of these look questionable?" I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Restaurant charges at expensive steakhouses, golf course fees, a weekend at a casino resort in Atlantic City. Either David's business involves a lot of entertainment, or he's been using your money for personal expenses." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Not only had they been taking my money for granted, they'd been misusing it. David had been living it up on my dime while telling everyone I helped out sometimes. "Margaret, I want you to have our attorney send a formal accounting request. I want to know exactly what David's been charging to those credit cards for the past 3 years. Are you considering legal action?" "I'm considering all my options." We spent another hour setting up new investment strategies, updating beneficiaries on my accounts, and discussing my long-term financial goals. For the first time in years, those goals didn't include supporting ungrateful adult children. As I was leaving, Margaret handed me a business card. "Ruth, I'd like you to meet someone. Eleanor Hartwell. She's a personal coach who specializes in helping women reclaim their power after difficult family situations. I think you two would hit it off. I walked out of that building feeling like a different woman. The afternoon sun seemed brighter, the air cleaner. I had plans now, goals that didn't revolve around other people's needs. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Ruth, Tyler's car was repossessed this morning. He's devastated. How could you do this to your own grandson? I stared at the message, waiting for the guilt to hit. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Tyler's car being repossessed meant he'd face real consequences for his choices. Maybe it would teach him something his parents clearly hadn't. I texted back, "Actions have consequences. Tyler will learn to make better choices." Her response was immediate. "You're a horrible grandmother." I almost replied with a list of everything I'd done for Tyler over the years, but stopped myself. I didn't owe Jennifer explanations anymore. I didn't owe any of them anything. Instead, I drove to Eleanor Hartwell's office for an impromptu consultation. Eleanor was about my age, with silver hair and laugh lines that suggested she'd figured out how to enjoy life. Her office was warm and inviting, filled with plants and comfortable furniture that made you want to sink in and tell secrets. "Margaret called ahead," Eleanor said, offering me tea. "She said you're going through a family restructuring." That's one way to put it. I prefer getting my life back. For the next hour, I told Eleanor everything. The years of silent support, the graduation party humiliation, the group chat exclusion, and my nuclear response. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Ruth, let me ask you something," she said when I finished. "In all those years of supporting your family financially, did they ever express gratitude? Did they ever acknowledge what you were sacrificing for them?" I thought about it carefully. No, never directly. It was always treated like it was just what I was supposed to do. "And when did you start believing that was your job?" The question hit me like a physical blow. When had I started believing that my value as a mother and grandmother was measured by my willingness to solve everyone's financial problems? "I think, after my husband died," I said slowly. "David was struggling with his new business. Jennifer was pregnant with Tyler. They needed help, and I had life insurance money. It felt good to be needed. Being needed and being used are two different things." We talked for another 30 minutes about boundaries, self-worth, and the difference between helping and enabling. Eleanor gave me homework. Write down every financial sacrifice I'd made for my family over the past 5 years. And beside each one, note whether anyone had thanked me. As I drove home, my phone rang constantly. David, Jennifer, Tyler, Mark, Sarah, even some cousins I hadn't heard from in months. Word was spreading through the family grapevine that the Bank of Ruth had closed. I let them all go to voicemail. That evening, I started my homework assignment. The list was longer than I'd expected, and the thank you column remained stubbornly empty. Page after page of financial support, and not a single expression of genuine gratitude. But the exercise revealed something else, a pattern of escalating demands. It had started with small emergency loans and evolved into automatic monthly payments. They'd been conditioning me, gradually increasing their dependence until I was essentially funding their entire lifestyle. And I'd let it happen because being needed felt better than being alone. At 9 p.m., David showed up at my door again. This time he was alone, and he looked terrible, exhausted, stressed, maybe even a little humbled. "Mom, can we talk? Really talk?" I let him in, but I didn't offer coffee or try to make him comfortable. Those days were over. "David, before you say anything, I want you to know that I've had my attorney pull all the credit card statements. I know about the casino resort. I know about the golf club memberships. I know about the expensive dinners you've been charging to my account." His face went white. "Mom, I can explain." "No explanations necessary. I understand perfectly. You've been living a lifestyle you can't afford on my money, and you've been lying about it." He slumped into my sofa, looking like a man whose world was collapsing. Good. Maybe it needed to collapse. "What do you want from me?" he asked quietly. "I want you to grow up. I want you to take responsibility for your choices, and I want you to stop treating me like an ATM with gray hair. And if I do that, If I change, if I make things right, will you help us again? I looked at my son, this middle-aged man who still wanted Mommy to solve his problems, and I felt a strange mixture of love and disappointment. David, that's exactly the wrong question. You're still thinking about what you can get from me instead of what you can give back to this relationship. He sat there for a long moment, processing. Then, surprisingly, his shoulders began to shake. My successful grown son started crying right there on my couch. I don't know how to fix this, Mom. I don't know how to pay the mortgage or keep Tyler in school or save my marriage. I've been depending on your money for so long, I forgot how to handle things myself. It was the first honest thing he'd said to me in years. But honesty, I was learning, doesn't automatically earn forgiveness. It just makes the conversation more productive. Then you'd better start remembering, I said gently, because I'm done being your safety net. After he left, I sat in my quiet house and realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. I was disappointed and I was determined, but I wasn't angry. I was just done being taken for granted. The funeral home smelled like lilies and regret. I sat in the back row of folding chairs, watching my sister Linda's family grieve without really seeing me. Funny how invisible you become when people don't need your checkbook. Linda had passed suddenly from a heart attack at 68, 2 weeks after my family fallout. Her memorial service was packed with friends, neighbors, and relatives I hadn't seen in years. David and Jennifer sat in the front row with Tyler, playing the part of bereaved nephew and family. They'd nodded politely when they saw me, but kept their distance. Perfect. I wasn't in the mood for their drama anyway. Ruth? Ruth Henderson? A woman about my age approached my chair, her face familiar but aged. It's me, Susan Williams. We went to high school together. It took me a moment to place her, then the memories flooded back. Susan Peterson, cheerleader, prom queen, the girl who'd married her high school sweetheart and moved to California before graduation. Susan, my goodness, it's been 40 years? 42, she laughed, settling into the empty chair beside me. I moved back east last year after my husband passed. I'm living in Millbrook now, about an hour from here. We caught up quietly during the service. Susan had raised 3 children in California, worked as a nurse for 30 years, and recently become a widow. Her kids were scattered across the country, busy with their own lives. They're good kids, she said, but they treat me like I'm fragile now, like I might break if they don't manage every detail of my life. I understood that feeling completely. After the service, Susan and I found ourselves at the same table during the reception. David made a brief appearance to pay his respects, but he was clearly uncomfortable with my presence. Good. Let him squirm. Your son seems nervous, Susan observed, watching David retreat to the opposite side of the room. We're going through a family adjustment period, I said diplomatically. Susan raised an eyebrow. That sounds like code for something interesting. I found myself telling her the whole story. The years of financial support, the graduation party humiliation, the group chat exclusion, and my decision to cut off funding. Susan listened with growing amazement. You've been paying their mortgage for 3 years? She asked. Ruth, that's incredible. And not in a good way. I'm starting to realize that. My oldest son tried something similar last year, Susan said. Asked me to co-sign a loan for a boat. A boat? When I said no, he accused me of being selfish with his inheritance, as if my money was already his. What did you do? Susan smiled wickedly. I bought myself a boat, a beautiful little sailboat that I keep at the marina. Every weekend, I post pictures of myself sailing with my new friends. My son doesn't ask for money anymore. We exchanged phone numbers before leaving, making plans to meet for lunch the following week. As I drove home, I realized I felt better than I had in months. Susan understood. She'd faced similar family manipulation and found a way to reclaim her life. Maybe I wasn't alone in this after all. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Tyler stood on my doorstep, looking younger than his 18 years, holding a folded piece of paper. Grandma Ruth, can I come in? I studied my grandson's face. He looked tired, stressed, and genuinely remorseful. Part of me wanted to hug him and fix everything immediately. The other part reminded me that he'd liked that message just as enthusiastically as the adults. Come in, Tyler. We should talk. He settled nervously on my sofa, still clutching the paper. I wrote you a letter, he said, offering it to me. I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I wanted to explain myself. I unfolded the handwritten letter, noting that Tyler had taken care with his penmanship. The words were carefully chosen, clearly thought out. Dear Grandma Ruth, I want to apologize for liking that message in the group chat. I know it hurt you, and I'm sorry. I was being a coward, going along with what my parents wanted instead of thinking for myself. I've been thinking about all the things you've done for me over the years. The money for my car, sure, but also the other stuff. When I was little, you were the only one who remembered I liked strawberry ice cream better than chocolate. You came to my baseball games even when it was raining. You helped me with my science fair projects when my parents were too busy. I know you loved me. I felt loved. But somewhere along the way, I started taking that for granted. I stopped saying thank you. I stopped appreciating you. Mom and Dad keep saying this is all about money, but I think it's about respect, and I haven't been respectful. I'm sorry for that. I don't expect you to fix my car situation or help with college. I got a job at the campus bookstore, and I'm applying for more financial aid. I want to figure things out for myself, but I hope someday you'll forgive me, because I miss my grandma, the real one, not the one who just wrote checks. Love, Tyler. I folded the letter carefully, surprised by the tears threatening my eyes. This was the first genuine apology I'd received from anyone in my family. Tyler, this is beautiful. Thank you for taking the time to write it. Do you forgive me? I looked at my grandson, this young man who was finally taking responsibility for his choices. I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. He nodded seriously. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and that I'm going to do better. We talked for another hour. Tyler told me about his new job, his plans for college, and his growing awareness of how his parents had been manipulating the family dynamics. He was more mature than I'd given him credit for, just buried under years of enabling. Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happier now, since you stopped helping everyone financially? The question surprised me with its insight. Yes, Tyler. I am happier. I'm discovering who I am when I'm not just solving other people's problems. Good. You deserve to be happy. After Tyler left, I called Susan. We made plans to drive to the coast the following weekend, just for fun. When was the last time I'd done something just for fun? That afternoon, Eleanor Hartwell called to check in. Ruth, how are you handling the family pressure? Better than I expected. I had a breakthrough with my grandson today. That's wonderful. What about the others? I thought about David's desperate visits, Jennifer's angry texts, the constant voicemail messages. They're still in crisis mode, still thinking this is temporary. What makes you think it isn't temporary? The question caught me off guard. Was this temporary? Was I planning to eventually resume my role as family ATM? Eleanor, I think I've been waiting for them to prove they've changed, but maybe that's the wrong approach. What would be the right approach? Maybe I need to prove to myself that I've changed, that I'm not the same woman who let herself be taken for granted for years. That evening, I did something I'd been avoiding for weeks. I sat down and wrote my own letter, not to my family, but to myself, a promise about the woman I wanted to become. Dear Ruth, you are not responsible for everyone else's financial security. You are not required to sacrifice your comfort for other people's convenience. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to expect gratitude. You are allowed to be appreciated for who you are, not what you can provide. Your worth is not measured by your willingness to solve problems or write checks. Your value comes from your kindness, your wisdom, your decades of experience, and your capacity for love. You have raised your children. You have been a good wife, mother, and grandmother. You have paid your dues. The rest of your life belongs to you. Don't forget this again. Love. Yourself. I folded the letter and put it in my jewelry box next to my mother's pearl earrings and my wedding ring. A reminder of who I was becoming. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time since Linda's funeral, and in my dreams, I was sailing on a beautiful boat with new friends while my phone sat silent on the dock. The next morning would bring new challenges, but I was ready for them. I was finally ready to live my own life. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, mixed in with my usual bills and grocery store circulars. The return address made my stomach clench. Hartwell, Morrison and Associates, attorneys at law. My first thought was that David had hired a lawyer to somehow force me to resume the family payments. But as I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, I realized the truth was much worse. The letter was from Jennifer's attorney, informing me that I was being sued for elder financial abuse against my own family. According to the complaint, I had manipulated the family's financial dependents to exercise undue influence over their decisions. By suddenly withdrawing support, I had allegedly caused severe emotional and financial distress that constituted a form of abuse. The audacity took my breath away. They were actually trying to make me the villain in this story. I called Eleanor immediately. She listened grimly as I read the legal language aloud. Ruth, this is obviously frivolous, but it's also concerning. It sounds like they're trying to establish a legal foundation for claiming you're mentally incompetent. What do you mean? If they can convince a court that your financial decisions are erratic or harmful, they might try to get conservatorship over your assets. It's a common scam families run on elderly relatives. My blood ran cold. They weren't just trying to get my money back, they were trying to take control of all of it. Eleanor, what do I do? First, don't panic. Second, call Margaret Chen immediately. Third, get yourself the best attorney money can buy. If they want to play legal games, let's make sure you win. I spent the rest of the day assembling my defense team. Margaret recommended a family law attorney named Patricia Morse, who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. Patricia was sharp, experienced, and immediately grasped the situation. Mrs. Henderson, your daughter-in-law has made a serious miscalculation, Patricia said during our emergency meeting. Not only is this lawsuit baseless, it's actually backfired. By filing these claims, she's created a legal record of her family's financial dependence on you. That's going to be very useful for our countersuit. Countersuit? Patricia smiled grimly. Oh yes, we're going to sue them for financial exploitation of an elderly person. 3 years of mortgage payments, credit card abuses, and manipulation. We have a very strong case. Over the next week, we built our defense systematically. Margaret provided detailed financial records showing the pattern of family dependence. Eleanor documented the emotional manipulation. Patricia gathered evidence of David's business expense abuses. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. Tyler called me on Thursday evening, his voice shaky with anger. Grandma Ruth, I need to tell you something. About the lawsuit. Tyler, you don't have to get involved in this. Yes, I do. Because I know something they don't think I know. He told me about a conversation he'd overheard between his parents and Jennifer's lawyer. They'd been coaching him on what to say if called as a witness, instructing him to claim that I'd been confused and erratic in recent months. They wanted him to suggest that my financial decisions showed signs of mental decline. They want me to lie, Grandma. They want me to help them steal your money by claiming you're losing your mind. The betrayal was breathtaking in its scope. They weren't just taking my money. They were trying to take my autonomy, my dignity, my very right to make my own decisions. Tyler, would you be willing to testify about what you overheard? Absolutely. I'm done protecting them. What they're doing is evil. That weekend, Susan drove up to visit and provide moral support. We sat in my garden, drinking wine and planning my counterattack. You know what I find most amazing about this whole situation? Susan said, refilling our glasses. What's that? They're spending money they don't have on lawyers to try to get money they're not entitled to. It's like watching someone dig their own grave with a gold shovel. She was right. The legal fees alone would cost them thousands. Money they clearly didn't have since they'd been depending on my support. They were borrowing against their future to fund a lawsuit that would likely fail. Susan, I have an idea. A terrible, wonderful idea. Monday morning, I called Patricia with my proposal. She listened carefully, then began laughing. Mrs. Henderson, that's absolutely diabolical and completely legal. I love it. The next phase of my plan required patience and perfect timing. While Jennifer's lawyer prepared their frivolous lawsuit, I began quietly gathering something much more powerful. Documentation of every financial interaction we'd had over the past 5 years. Bank transfers, credit card statements, loan agreements, even casual text messages about money. Margaret's team compiled everything into a comprehensive financial history that painted a clear picture of systematic exploitation. But the coup de grace came when Patricia's investigator discovered something Jennifer probably thought I'd never find out about. She'd been telling her friends and neighbors that I was becoming senile and that they were managing my finances for my own protection. She'd been laying the groundwork for this legal assault for months, possibly years. "Patricia, how much can we sue them for?" "Well, there's the $287,000 in direct transfers. Then there's interest and penalties, emotional distress, legal fees. And if we can prove fraudulent intent," she calculated rapidly, "we could be looking at over $500,000. $500,000, more than they'd ever be able to repay. And if they can't pay, then we start seizing assets. The house, the cars, the business equipment, everything goes to satisfy the judgment." That afternoon, I did something that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I authorized Patricia to file our countersuit immediately, asking for full damages and requesting an emergency hearing to freeze all of David and Jennifer's assets pending the outcome. "Mrs. Henderson, are you sure you want to go nuclear?" Patricia asked. I thought about the group chat message, about Tyler's car being repossessed while they planned their legal assault, about years of thankless financial support followed by accusations of mental incompetence. "Patricia, they fired the first shot. I'm just making sure it's the last shot of the war." The papers were served that evening while David and Jennifer were having dinner at their favorite restaurant. According to the process server, Jennifer actually shrieked when she read the countersuit. They called me within an hour, both of them shouting through the speakerphone. "Mom, this is insane!" David's voice was pitched high with panic. "You're trying to destroy us!" "No, David, I'm trying to protect myself from people who've been systematically exploiting me for years." "We never exploited you," Jennifer screamed. "We loved you. We included you in our family." "You included my bank account in your family." "There's a difference." The conversation devolved into threats and accusations, but I hung up feeling oddly calm. For the first time in this entire mess, I was playing offense instead of defense. That night, Eleanor called to check on me. "Ruth, how are you feeling about escalating things legally?" "Honestly, I feel powerful. For years, I've been reacting to their demands, their crises, their emotional manipulation. Now I'm setting the terms. And if they apologize? If they try to make amends?" I thought about that carefully. "Eleanor, I think we're past apologies. They tried to have me declared mentally incompetent to steal my money. That's not a mistake or a misunderstanding. That's a calculated assault on my dignity and freedom. So what's your end game?" "My end game is showing them that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people badly and expect them to keep enabling you forever." "And what about Tyler?" Tyler was the one part of this situation that still caused me pain. But even that was getting clearer. Tyler's learning that sometimes doing the right thing means standing up to the people you love. It's a hard lesson, but an important one. The legal battle would take months to resolve, but I already felt like I'd won something more important than money. I'd won back my self-respect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I was sleeping in my own bed, in my own house, making my own decisions about my own life. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The mediation conference was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a gray November morning. Patricia had prepared me thoroughly, but walking into that sterile conference room still felt like entering a battlefield. David and Jennifer sat on one side of the long table with their attorney, a nervous-looking man who kept shuffling papers. I took my seat across from them with Patricia beside me, noting how they avoided eye contact. Jennifer looked terrible. She'd lost weight, and her usually perfect hair was showing gray roots. David's suit was wrinkled, and he had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping. Good. Maybe they were finally understanding the gravity of their situation. The mediator, a calm woman in her 60s named Dr. Sarah Blackwood, opened the session with the standard speech about confidentiality and good faith negotiations. "We're here because both parties have filed serious claims against each other," she began. "Mrs. Henderson, you're claiming financial exploitation. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, you're claiming elder financial abuse. These are serious allegations that could result in significant financial and legal consequences for everyone involved." Jennifer's attorney cleared his throat. Dr. Blackwood, my clients are here today hoping to resolve this matter amicably. They love Mrs. Henderson and want to rebuild their family relationship. Patricia leaned forward. Dr. Blackwood, my client has documentation showing that the Davis family has systematically exploited her financially for over 5 years, culminating in an attempt to have her declared mentally incompetent to maintain control of her assets. The mediator reviewed our financial records for several minutes, her expression growing increasingly grave. Mrs. Davis, she said finally, these documents show substantial financial transfers from Mrs. Henderson to your family. Can you explain the nature of these payments? Jennifer's composure cracked immediately. She's our family. She wanted to help us. We never forced her to give us anything. But you did expect those payments to continue indefinitely, Patricia interjected. Even to the point of filing a lawsuit when they stopped. We filed that lawsuit because her behavior became erratic, David burst out. She cut off all contact with the family over a simple misunderstanding. Dr. Blackwood consulted her notes. According to the documentation provided, Mrs. Henderson was excluded from family gatherings via group text message. Is that accurate? The silence that followed was deafening. Their attorney whispered something urgent to Jennifer, who flushed red. That was taken out of context, Jennifer said weakly. The message read, and I quote, Patricia said, reading from her notes, "We've all agreed you're no longer part of the family. Don't come to any gatherings." How exactly is that taken out of context? Dr. Blackwood made several notes, then looked up with the expression of someone who'd seen enough family dysfunction to fill several psychology textbooks. Let's take a break, she announced. I'd like to speak with each party separately. During our private session, Dr. Blackwood was blunt. Mrs. Henderson, based on the documentation you've provided, you have an extremely strong case for financial exploitation. The pattern of dependency, the manipulation, the attempt to claim mental incompetence. It's textbook elder abuse. What about their claim that I was being abusive by withdrawing support? She actually laughed. Mrs. Henderson, you are under no legal obligation to financially support adult children or their families. Withdrawing voluntary assistance is not abuse, it's boundary setting. When the session resumed, David and Jennifer looked even more shaken. Their attorney had clearly explained their legal position, which was somewhere between weak and non-existent. Mrs. Henderson, their attorney began carefully. My clients would like to apologize for any misunderstandings and propose a settlement. I'm listening, I said coolly. Jennifer leaned forward, tears starting to flow. Ruth, I'm sorry. We're sorry. We took you for granted, and we handled the whole situation badly. We want to make things right. What did you have in mind? David pulled out a handwritten document. We've prepared a formal apology acknowledging our mistakes. We'll drop our lawsuit immediately, and we'll agree to a structured repayment plan for the money you've given us over the years. Patricia examined the document, her eyebrows rising. Mrs. Henderson, they're proposing to repay $50,000 over 10 years. That's less than 20% of what you've actually provided, and it doesn't include interest or legal fees. I stared at my son, this man who'd once been a little boy who brought me dandelions and told me he loved me every night at bedtime. David, do you have any idea how much money I've given your family over the past 5 years? He shifted uncomfortably. I know it's been substantial. $287,000. Plus interest, that's over $320,000 in today's dollars. The number hit the room like a bomb. Jennifer actually gasped. Their attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. You're offering to repay $50,000 of the $320,000 you've taken from me, and you think that's fair? Mom, we don't have that kind of money, David said desperately. We've been living paycheck to paycheck. Living paycheck to paycheck on my paycheck, I corrected. David, you've been charging casino trips and golf memberships to my credit cards while telling people I help out sometimes. That's not paycheck to paycheck living. That's fraud. Jennifer tried a different approach. Ruth, what about Tyler? He's your grandson. Do you really want to destroy his family over money? The manipulation was so blatant, it was almost impressive. Appeal to my love for Tyler to guilt me into accepting their inadequate offer. Jennifer, let me be very clear about something. Tyler will always be welcome in my life, regardless of what happens between us. but he's also learning an important lesson about consequences and integrity, something you apparently never taught him. Dr. Blackwood intervened. Let's focus on realistic solutions. Mrs. Henderson, what would you need to see to consider settling this matter? I looked across the table at David and Jennifer, these people who'd been so casual about taking my money and so vicious about attacking my competence when I stopped providing it. Full repayment of all documented transfers, plus legal fees and interest, a formal admission of financial exploitation, and a binding agreement that they will never again contact me asking for financial assistance. Their attorney went pale. Mrs. Henderson, that's over $500,000. My clients don't have those resources. Then perhaps they should have thought about that before filing a frivolous lawsuit claiming I'm mentally incompetent. Jennifer dissolved into tears. Ruth, you're asking us to lose everything, our house, our cars, David's business. You risked everything when you decided to bite the hand that fed you, I replied calmly. I'm simply allowing you to face the natural consequences of your choices. The mediation continued for another 2 hours, but the positions were clear. They wanted me to accept pennies on the dollar and pretend the whole thing had been a misunderstanding. I wanted full accountability and actual consequences. As we were packing up to leave, David made one last desperate plea. Mom, please, I know we screwed up, but we're still family. Don't destroy us over this. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and felt a strange mixture of love and disappointment. David, you destroyed this relationship when you decided I wasn't family, unless I was paying your bills. I'm just declining to keep funding my own mistreatment. Walking out of that conference room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete control over my own life. No more guilt, no more manipulation, no more trying to buy love from people who saw me as an ATM. Patricia was practically glowing. Mrs. Henderson, that was magnificent. They have no legal ground to stand on, and they know it. What happens next? They have 30 days to respond to our settlement demand. If they refuse, we go to trial and likely get everything we asked for plus punitive damages. That evening, Tyler called. Grandma, I heard about the mediation. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, sweetheart. I'm finally free. What does that mean? It means I'm done letting other people define my worth based on what I can do for them. It means I'm going to spend the rest of my life being appreciated for who I am, not what I can provide. And us? Our relationship? Tyler, you and I are fine. You apologize sincerely. You're taking responsibility for your choices, and you're building your own life. That's all I ever wanted from any of you. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Tomorrow might bring more legal challenges, more family drama, more attempts at manipulation. But tonight, I was exactly where I wanted to be, free, independent, and finally in control of my own story. The envelope was hand-delivered on a Thursday afternoon, dropped off by a nervous-looking teenager who disappeared before I could tip him. Inside was a single sheet of expensive stationery bearing the letterhead of Davis Construction, LLC, David's business. The letter was typed, formal, and devastating. Dear Mom, we've made our decision. We're not accepting your settlement terms, and we're not dropping our lawsuit. Our attorney has advised us that we have a strong case for elder financial abuse, and we're prepared to take this matter to trial. Furthermore, we've hired a forensic accountant to examine all financial transactions between us over the past 5 years. We believe we'll be able to prove that you used money as a weapon to control our family's decisions. We're also pursuing a competency evaluation. Your recent erratic behavior and vindictive legal actions suggest cognitive decline that requires professional assessment. This ends now. Either you restore our financial arrangements and drop your frivolous countersuit, or we'll see you in court. David and Jennifer Davis. I read the letter twice, then set it down and started laughing. Not bitter laughter or angry laughter, but genuine amusement at the sheer audacity of it all. They were doubling down. After everything we'd discovered, after all the evidence Patricia had compiled, they were actually trying to intimidate me into submission. I called Patricia immediately. They want a war? Patricia said after I read her the letter. Perfect. I love it when opposing counsel makes my job easier. How is this making your job easier? Because they just put their threats in writing. Attempting to coerce an elderly person through legal intimidation is a felony in this state. We can now add criminal charges to our civil suit. Criminal charges? Oh, Mrs. Henderson, we're not just going to take their money anymore. We're going to take their freedom. That afternoon, Patricia filed additional motions with the court, including a request for criminal investigation of the Davis family's actions. She also expedited our asset freezing request, effectively locking down everything they owned pending the trial outcome. The phone started ringing at 6 p.m. David, hysterical and barely coherent. "Mom, what have you done? The bank just froze our accounts. We can't pay the mortgage. We can't pay our employees. We can't pay anything. David, you sent me a letter threatening to have me declared mentally incompetent. What did you think would happen? This is insane. You're destroying innocent people over hurt feelings." Innocent people? I almost choked on the irony. "David, you've spent 5 years systematically exploiting me financially, then tried to have me declared mentally incompetent when I stopped enabling you. In what world does that make you innocent?" Jennifer grabbed the phone. "Ruth, please. We have employees depending on us. People will lose their jobs because of your vindictiveness. Then perhaps you should have considered that before escalating this situation. We can't take back what we wrote. Please, we'll accept your settlement terms. We'll agree to anything." It was too late for that, and we both knew it. They'd crossed a line by threatening my mental competency, and there was no walking that back. "Jennifer, you had multiple opportunities to resolve this reasonably. You chose aggression instead. Now you'll live with the consequences." I hung up and immediately called Eleanor. "Ruth, how are you handling the escalation?" "Honestly, I feel powerful. For the first time in this whole mess, I'm not reacting to their moves. I'm making the moves." "Are you concerned about the family relationships?" I thought about that carefully. "Eleanor, what relationship? For 5 years, they've seen me as a resource to be managed. When I stopped being useful, they tried to have me declared incompetent. That's not a relationship worth preserving. What about Tyler?" Tyler remained the one bright spot in this disaster. He'd called earlier to tell me he'd been subpoenaed to testify and was actually looking forward to it. "Grandma, I want to tell the truth about what they did, about how they talked about you, how they planned this whole thing. People need to know." The trial was scheduled for February, but the criminal investigation moved faster. Detective Maria Santos from the Elder Abuse Unit called on Friday morning. "Mrs. Henderson, I've reviewed your complaint and the supporting documentation. We're opening a formal investigation into financial exploitation and attempted fraud." What does that mean? It means Mr. and Mrs. Davis could be facing felony charges. Financial exploitation of an elderly person carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. 10 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. I'd wanted accountability, consequences, justice, but the thought of my son in prison for a decade was almost unbearable. "Detective Santos, what if they were to plead guilty and agree to full restitution?" That would be up to the district attorney's office. But it's certainly possible, especially for first-time offenders. That evening, Susan drove up for a planned visit, arriving to find me sitting in my garden, staring at the sunset. "Ruth, you look troubled. What's happening?" I told her about the criminal investigation, the potential prison sentences, my conflicted feelings about how far this had escalated. "Are you having second thoughts?" she asked gently. "I don't know. Part of me wants them to face real consequences for what they did, but part of me never wanted it to go this far." Susan was quiet for a long moment, then asked a question that cut straight to the heart of everything. "Ruth, if you could go back 5 years and know everything you know now, would you still have helped them financially?" I considered it carefully. No. I would have set boundaries from the beginning. I would have required appreciation, accountability, respect. And if they had given you those things, if they had treated you with dignity while accepting your help, then we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. Susan nodded. "That's your answer. This isn't about the money, and it never was. It's about dignity and respect. They chose to treat you badly, and now they're learning that actions have consequences." She was right. I wasn't destroying my family over money. I was protecting myself from people who'd been systematically destroying my sense of self-worth for years. Monday morning brought an unexpected call from a reporter at the local newspaper. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm working on a story about elder financial abuse in our community. Would you be willing to share your experience?" The idea terrified and thrilled me simultaneously. Going public would mean exposing my family's behavior to the entire community, but it would also mean helping other elderly people recognize and resist similar exploitation. Can I think about it? Of course. The story would be published with or without your participation, but your perspective would be valuable. After she hung up, I called Patricia. "Should I talk to the reporter?" "Mrs. Henderson, that's entirely your decision. But I will say this. Publicity often encourages other victims to come forward. You might not be the only elderly person they've taken advantage of. Other victims." The thought hadn't occurred to me, but it made perfect sense. People who would systematically exploit their own mother might not limit themselves to family members. I called the reporter back that afternoon. "I'll do the interview, but I want to make sure the focus is on prevention and education, not just sensationalizing my family's dysfunction." "Absolutely, Mrs. Henderson. This is about helping other families avoid similar situations." As I prepared for the interview, I realized something important. I wasn't ashamed anymore. For months, I'd felt embarrassed about being taken advantage of, guilty about cutting off support, conflicted about the legal consequences. But now I felt something else entirely. Proud. Proud of finally standing up for myself. Proud of refusing to be anyone's ATM. Proud of showing other elderly people that they didn't have to tolerate financial abuse from their families. Tomorrow would bring the interview, and next week would bring more legal developments. But tonight, I was sleeping peacefully, knowing I'd chosen dignity over dysfunction. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The newspaper article hit the stands on a Tuesday morning, and by noon, my phone was ringing nonstop. The reporter had done an excellent job, focusing on the warning signs of elder financial abuse while protecting my family's privacy. But the local community was small enough that most people figured out who was involved. The response was overwhelming and unexpected. "Mrs. Henderson," said the first caller, an elderly woman named Grace Patterson. "I read your story in the paper, and I wanted to thank you. My daughter has been pressuring me to co-sign loans for years, and reading about your experience gave me the courage to say no." The second call came from a man whose son had been gradually taking control of his finances for his own protection. The third was from a woman whose family was pressuring her to sell her house and move in with them. By the end of the week, I'd received over 40 calls from elderly people dealing with financial manipulation from their families. The article had touched a nerve in the community. Eleanor suggested I consider starting a support group. "Ruth, you've obviously struck a chord. These people need guidance, and you have experience they can learn from. I don't know anything about running support groups. You know about setting boundaries, recognizing manipulation, and standing up for yourself. That's exactly what they need to hear." The idea grew on me over the weekend. Susan encouraged it enthusiastically. "You could call it something like Seniors Supporting Seniors or The Dignity Project," she suggested. "Meet weekly, share experiences, give each other courage. Would you help me run it?" "Are you kidding? I've been dealing with my own family manipulation for years. This sounds perfect." We scheduled the first meeting for the following Thursday evening at the community center. I expected maybe a dozen people. 27 showed up. The stories they shared were heartbreaking and familiar. Adult children who'd gradually taken control of bank accounts. Grandchildren who only called when they needed money. Families who'd isolated elderly relatives from friends and outside support. But the most powerful moment came when a frail woman in her 80s stood up to speak. "My name is Dorothy, and 6 months ago my son convinced me to sign over power of attorney because I was getting confused. Last week, I discovered he'd sold my house and moved me into assisted living without my consent. I don't know what to do." The room went silent. Dorothy's situation was exactly what David and Jennifer had been trying to create for me. "Dorothy," I said gently, "have you spoken to an attorney? I can't afford one, and my son says no one will believe me because I'm old and forgetful." Patricia had been attending the meeting as my guest. She stepped forward. "Dorothy, I'm a family law attorney, and what you're describing is criminal fraud. I'd be happy to represent you pro bono. By the end of the evening, Patricia had taken on 3 more cases, and we'd formed a network of support that felt revolutionary. These weren't just support group members. They were warriors reclaiming their dignity. Meanwhile, my own legal case was approaching its climax. David and Jennifer's attorney had requested another mediation session, claiming his clients were now willing to accept full accountability. "Mrs. Henderson," he said during our phone call, "my clients realize they made serious errors in judgment. They're prepared to accept your original settlement terms and provide a public apology. What about the criminal investigation? They're hoping that full restitution might convince the district attorney to consider reduced charges." I discussed it with Patricia, who was skeptical. "They're desperate. Mrs. Henderson, the criminal investigation has uncovered some additional financial irregularities. Apparently, they've been running similar schemes on other elderly family members." "Other family members?" "Jennifer's grandmother on her father's side. David's great-aunt. They've been systematically exploiting elderly relatives for years." "You were just the biggest score." The revelation was sickening. This wasn't a family disagreement that got out of hand. It was a pattern of predatory behavior targeting vulnerable elderly people. "Patricia, what kind of additional charges are we looking at?" "Multiple counts of elder financial abuse, elder, fraud, conspiracy. If convicted on all counts, they could be facing 20 to 30 years combined." 20 to 30 years. The numbers felt surreal. My son and daughter-in-law could spend decades in prison for what started as unpaid mortgage assistance. But the more I learned about their other victims, the less sympathy I felt. Jennifer's grandmother had lost her life savings. David's great-aunt had been forced to sell her home. They'd been running a family financial abuse operation for at least 6 years. The second mediation session was scheduled for the following week. This time, David and Jennifer arrived looking defeated, accompanied by a different attorney and a financial advisor. "Mrs. Henderson," their new attorney began, "my clients want to make a full confession and complete restitution to all victims." They'd prepared a comprehensive settlement package, full repayment of all money taken from me, $327,000 with interest. Similar restitution to the other elderly relatives, public apologies acknowledging their financial abuse, and agreements to seek counseling for financial manipulation behaviors. "What about the criminal charges?" Patricia asked. "The district attorney has agreed to consider plea bargains if full restitution is made to all victims and my clients cooperate with the investigation." I looked across the table at David and Jennifer. Jennifer was crying silently, her makeup streaked down her cheeks. David looked like a man who'd aged 10 years in 6 months. "David," I said quietly, "do you understand what you did? Not just to me, but to all of us?" He nodded, unable to speak. "Say it. I need to hear you say it." His voice was barely a whisper. "We exploited you. We took advantage of your generosity and your love for family. We manipulated you financially and emotionally. And when you tried to protect yourself, we attacked your mental competency to try to regain control. And we did the same thing to other family members. We targeted elderly relatives because we thought they were vulnerable and couldn't fight back." Jennifer looked up, mascara streaking her face. "Ruth, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We became people I don't recognize. We hurt people we should have protected." It was the first genuine apology I'd received from either of them. Dr. Blackwood, who was mediating again, reviewed the settlement terms carefully. "Mrs. Henderson, this is a comprehensive resolution. Are you prepared to accept these terms?" I thought about Dorothy from the support group, about the other elderly people who'd called after the newspaper article, about the pattern of abuse that went far beyond my own family. "I'll accept the financial terms and the cooperation with criminal investigation. But I have additional requirements." "What kind of requirements?" "I want them to speak at our support group meetings. I want them to help educate other families about the warning signs of elder financial abuse. I want them to use their experience to prevent other people from becoming victims." Their attorney looked surprised. "You want them to become advocates against elder abuse?" "I want them to understand the full impact of what they've done and work to prevent others from making the same mistakes." David looked up for the first time during the session. "Mom, you want us to help other families? I want you to help repair the damage you've done to the community. Financial abuse destroys families, David. Maybe you can help put some of them back together." The agreement was signed that afternoon. Full restitution to all victims, cooperation with law enforcement, and a commitment to elder abuse prevention advocacy. Walking out of that conference room, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not hope for rebuilding my relationship with David and Jennifer, but hope that something good might come from this nightmare. That evening, Tyler called with news that surprised me. "Grandma, I've been accepted to law school. I want to specialize in elder law, helping elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse." Tyler, that's wonderful. What inspired the career change? You did. Watching you fight back showed me that someone needs to stand up for people who are being taken advantage of. I want to be that someone. As I hung up the phone, I realized that the most important victory wasn't the money I'd recovered or the justice I'd achieved. It was the example I'd set for my grandson and the dozens of other elderly people who were now finding their voices. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I was proud of who I'd become. Not the grandmother who wrote checks to buy affection, but the woman who stood up for herself and inspired others to do the same. And that felt like the best inheritance I could leave behind. 6 months after the settlement, I was sitting in my new office at the community center, preparing for our weekly support group meeting, when Tyler knocked on the door. "Grandma, do you have a minute?" He was dressed in a sharp suit, looking every inch the serious law student he'd become, but his expression was troubled, which immediately put me on alert. "Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong?" Tyler settled into the chair across from my desk, then pulled out a thick manila folder. "I've been doing some research for my elder law class, looking into financial abuse cases, and I found something you need to see." He opened the folder, revealing what looked like court documents and newspaper clippings. "Remember how Dad and Jennifer said they'd only been doing this for a few years? Well, I dug deeper into public records. Grandma, they've been running this scam for over a decade." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" Tyler spread out the documents methodically. Jennifer's first husband before she married Dad. She convinced his elderly father to sign over power of attorney in 2009. The old man died 6 months later, and Jennifer inherited everything. The family contested the will, but by then, the money was gone. I stared at the documents, trying to process what I was seeing. "Tyler, are you saying Jennifer has done this before?" "Not just Jennifer. Dad, too. Remember his first business, the one that failed right before he married Jennifer? I found bankruptcy records. He'd been charging elderly clients for home repairs, taking their money up front, then declaring bankruptcy to avoid completing the work. The room started spinning. This wasn't a family that had gradually fallen into bad financial habits. This was a systematic pattern of elder abuse going back more than a decade. How many victims? Tyler's face was grim. At least 12 that I can document. Probably more. Grandma, they've been targeting elderly people their entire adult lives. I reached for my phone to call Patricia, but Tyler stopped me. There's more. Something that's going to hurt. He pulled out a final document. This one newer than the others. Last week, Jennifer filed for divorce from Dad. But here's the thing. She's claiming that the elder abuse was all his idea, that she was just following his lead. She's trying to cut a deal with the district attorney to testify against him in exchange for reduced charges. The betrayal was stunning. After everything they'd done together, Jennifer was now throwing David under the bus to save herself. Where's your father now? He's moved back in with Uncle Mark temporarily. He's been calling me, wanting to meet and explain everything. I think he's finally ready to tell the whole truth. I agreed to meet David that evening at a neutral location, a quiet diner on the edge of town where we could talk privately. He was waiting when I arrived, looking haggard and defeated. "Mom, thank you for coming. I know you don't owe me anything." I slid into the booth across from him, noting how much weight he'd lost, how gray his hair had become. Tyler told me about Jennifer's plea bargain, and about the other victims. David's shoulders sagged. "So you know." "I know some of it. I want to hear the rest from you." For the next 2 hours, David told me a story that was even worse than I'd imagined. Jennifer had been running elder abuse scams since her early 20s, targeting wealthy elderly people through dating sites, church groups, and community organizations. She'd refined her techniques over the years, becoming expert at identifying vulnerable targets and gaining their trust. She taught me everything. David said, his voice hollow. How to spot elderly people who were isolated, how to gradually gain control of their finances, how to make them dependent on us emotionally so they'd keep giving. David, you're talking about predatory behavior. You were deliberately targeting vulnerable people. I know that now. But at the time, Jennifer made it seem like we were just accepting generosity from people who wanted to help family. She had a way of justifying everything. What about me? Was I just another target? David looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. You were different. You're my mother. I love you. But Jennifer convinced me that you wanted to help, that taking your money was just letting you feel useful and needed. For 5 years, David, you let me pay your bills for 5 years while treating me like hired help. I know, and I hate myself for it. Mom, I want to make this right. How? David pulled out his own folder of documents. I've been working with a private investigator, documenting all of Jennifer's previous victims. I want to help them get their money back. I want to testify against her in court. I want to make sure she never does this to another family. The conversation continued until almost midnight. David told me about elderly victims who'd lost life savings, about families torn apart by Jennifer's manipulations, about a pattern of abuse that spanned multiple states and countless victims. Why are you telling me all this now? I asked finally. Because Tyler made me realize something. He said you didn't fight back just for the money. You fought back to protect other people from going through what you went through. And he's right. If I don't help stop Jennifer, she'll just find new victims. A week later, I sat in the district attorney's office with Patricia, Tyler, and David as prosecutors outlined their expanded case against Jennifer. With David's cooperation, they'd identified 17 additional victims and recovered evidence of a sophisticated elder abuse operation. Mrs. Henderson, the lead prosecutor said, your decision to fight back has potentially saved dozens of future victims. Jennifer Wright, that's her real name, by the way, has been running these scams across multiple states for over 15 years. Wright wasn't even her real last name. She'd been using false identities, fake references, and forged documents to gain credibility with her targets. What kind of sentence is she looking at? With the additional charges and the pattern of predatory behavior, we're looking at 40 to 60 years. She'll likely die in prison. David flinched at the number, but didn't object. He'd made his choice to cooperate fully, understanding that justice sometimes required painful sacrifices. The support group meeting that Thursday was larger than usual. Word had spread about the criminal investigation, and several people had driven from neighboring counties to attend. Dorothy, whose son had stolen her house, stood up to share an update. I wanted everyone to know that thanks to Patricia and this group, I got my house back. My son has been arrested, and I'm living independently again. The applause was thunderous. Dorothy had become a symbol of what was possible when elderly people refused to be victims. But more importantly, she continued, I've learned that age doesn't make us powerless. It makes us experienced. And experience is the best weapon we have against people who try to take advantage of us. After the meeting, Tyler pulled me aside. Grandma, I've been thinking about something. This support group, the legal work you're doing, the advocacy, it's become bigger than just our family situation. What do you mean? I mean you've started a movement. People are calling you the Dignity Grandmother online. There are support groups starting in other cities, modeling themselves after ours. You've become a symbol. A symbol. The idea was both flattering and terrifying. Tyler, I just wanted people to stop taking advantage of me. And in the process, you've shown thousands of other elderly people that they don't have to tolerate abuse either. That's bigger than just our family, Grandma. That's changing the world. As I drove home that night, I thought about the strange turns my life had taken. A year ago, I'd been a lonely widow writing checks to buy family affection. Now, I was leading a movement, helping elderly people across the country find their voices and reclaim their dignity. The road ahead still held challenges. Jennifer's trial was scheduled for next month, and there would likely be more victims coming forward. David was facing his own legal consequences, though his cooperation had earned him a more favorable plea agreement. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not as someone's ATM or enabler, but as an advocate for people who'd been forgotten and dismissed. And tomorrow, I'd wake up ready to fight for them again. The courtroom was packed on the morning of Jennifer's sentencing. I sat in the front row with Tyler, Patricia, and 6 other elderly victims who'd traveled from across the state to see justice served. After 18 months of legal proceedings, this was finally the end. Jennifer looked smaller than I remembered, dressed in an orange jumpsuit with her hair pulled back severely. The woman who'd once commanded my kitchen and controlled my family's finances now sat shackled at the defendant's table, awaiting her fate. Judge Margaret Steinberg was known for her tough stance on elder abuse cases. She'd reviewed all the evidence, heard from 17 victims, and listened to David's testimony about the scope of Jennifer's operations. "Ms. Wright," the judge began, using Jennifer's real name, "you have been convicted of multiple counts of elder financial abuse, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The evidence shows a pattern of predatory behavior spanning over 15 years and affecting dozens of elderly victims across multiple states." I watched Jennifer's face remain expressionless as the judge continued. "The court has received victim impact statements from 23 elderly people whose lives you've destroyed. You've stolen life savings, destroyed family relationships, and left vulnerable people homeless and destitute." The judge paused, consulting her notes. "However, the court has also received several letters on your behalf, including one from Mrs. Ruth Henderson, whose family you targeted most recently." I'd agonized over that letter for weeks. Patricia had advised against it. Tyler had questioned my motives, but Eleanor had helped me understand why I needed to write it. "Your Honor," I'd written, "I do not ask for leniency for Jennifer Wright. She is a predator who targeted vulnerable elderly people with calculated cruelty. However, I want the court to know that her victims are not just broken elderly people. We are strong, resilient individuals who have survived and thrived despite her abuse. We have found our voices, reclaimed our dignity, and built a community of support that will outlast any prison sentence you impose. Jennifer Wright stole our money, but she could not steal our spirit." Judge Steinberg continued reading from my letter. "Mrs. Henderson writes that while she supports the maximum sentence, she wants the court to understand that the victims in this case have become advocates and leaders, helping other elderly people recognize and resist financial abuse." The judge set down the letter and looked directly at Jennifer. "Ms. Wright, based on the severity of your crimes, the pattern of predatory behavior, and the extensive harm you've caused to vulnerable victims, this court sentences you to 55 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." 55 years. Jennifer would die in prison. There was no visible reaction from Jennifer, but I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, but resolution. The woman who'd tried to steal my dignity and destroy my family's future would never hurt another elderly person. After the hearing, the victims gathered outside the courthouse for what had become an impromptu support meeting. Dorothy was there, along with Grace Patterson and several others from our Thursday group. "What happens now?" asked Eleanor Murphy, a woman whose daughter-in-law had stolen her jewelry collection. "Now we keep fighting," I said. "This was never just about Jennifer or my family. This was about showing elderly people everywhere that they don't have to tolerate abuse." Tyler approached with a newspaper reporter who'd been covering the case. "Mrs. Henderson, how do you feel about the sentence?" "I feel like justice has been served. But more importantly, I feel proud of what all the victims accomplished by speaking up. We showed that elderly people are not helpless targets. We're experienced, intelligent individuals who refuse to be silenced." That afternoon, I received a call that surprised me. David was being released from county jail after serving 8 months and completing his community service requirements. His cooperation had earned him a suspended sentence and 5 years of probation. "Mom," he said when I answered the phone, "I know I don't have the right to ask, but would you consider meeting with me? I want to apologize properly, and I have something to propose." We met at the same diner where he'd confessed Jennifer's full history of abuse. He looked better than he had in months. Healthier, more focused, less defeated. "Mom, I know I can never fully make up for what I did to you and the others, but I want to try." "What did you have in mind?" David pulled out a business plan, professionally prepared and detailed. "I want to start a nonprofit organization focused on elder abuse prevention." I want to use my experience as Jennifer's partner to help law enforcement identify and prosecute financial predators. I reviewed the documents carefully. The plan was comprehensive, well-researched, and potentially very effective. David, this is impressive work. But why should I trust you? Because I understand these schemes from the inside. I know how predators think, how they choose targets, how they gain trust. I can teach elderly people to recognize the warning signs before they become victims. And you'd work with our support group? If you'll have me. Mom, I know I'll never be your son the way I was before all this happened. But maybe I can be something better. Maybe I can be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. It took me several weeks to decide. I consulted with Tyler, with Eleanor, with Patricia, and with the other support group members. The consensus was cautious, but supportive. If he's serious about prevention work, Dorothy said, then his insider knowledge could help a lot of people. 6 months later, David's nonprofit, the Dignity Defense Foundation, had helped identify 3 new elder abuse operations and assisted law enforcement in recovering over $400,000 for elderly victims. Our Thursday support group had grown into a network of 17 chapters across 3 states. Tyler had graduated law school and opened a practice specializing in elder law. The newspaper had written a follow-up article calling our movement a model for elder advocacy nationwide. But the moment that meant the most to me came on a quiet Tuesday evening. Tyler called with news that his law firm had just taken on a major case, a class action lawsuit against a scam operation targeting elderly people through fake charity calls. Grandma, we're going to shut down an entire call center that's been stealing from seniors. And it all started because you taught me that elderly people deserve dignity and respect. After we hung up, I sat in my garden, watching the sunset and thinking about the strange journey my life had taken. A year and a half ago, I'd been a lonely widow writing checks to buy family affection. Now, I was leading a movement that was helping elderly people across the country find their voices. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. Wine tonight? I have news about my sailboat adventure. I smiled and texted back, absolutely. I have news too. As I got ready for our evening together, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who'd stood in her kitchen 18 months ago, humiliated and excluded from her family's life. This woman stood straighter, smiled more confidently, lived more fully. This woman had learned that dignity wasn't something other people could give or take away. It was something you claimed for yourself, defended fiercely, and shared generously with others who needed to find their own. And this woman was just getting started. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new victims to help, new battles to fight. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged. Free, independent, and surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. The family that had tried to exclude me had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from people who don't appreciate you. And sometimes that courage changes not just your life, but the lives of everyone around you. I turned off the lights and headed out to meet Susan, ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. Because I'd finally learned the secret that had taken me 70 years to discover. The best chapters of your life can begin at any age, as long as you have the courage to write them yourself. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.